state murder mystery, saying she had been fighting with the girl. She wouldn't live at home. She dramatically changed her personality after moving to the UK. She was arrested in April for stealing with a group of friends. Then in June or July, she said her friends led her into other worrying habits, saying she did, in fact, start taking drugs, and the mother says she knew about it, even though the detective here is saying there's no reason to believe she was involved in drugs or the sex trade. Who knows at this point, of course, but that's not all. We also have the question of why was the body not found for months when the girl went missing in late August through September 2011. We have the fact that the Queen's own people were combing the estate in the fall throughout the months of October and November. Killer dog disease returns to Sandringham. A mystery seasonal illness that could kill dogs has returned to the Queen's estate. And it goes on to discuss how they don't know what causes the diseases, but the Queen herself was so worried she personally requested an Animal Health Trust veterinary investigation. They put up signs warning the public not to bring their dogs in the area. And basically, they were investigating the very plots of land where this woman was later found months later. So why didn't they find the woman, even though the Queen and the other royals continue to have their dog hunts, all these dogs coming over the area? Why didn't they find the body? It's certainly a question worth bringing up. And then you have the fact that the Queen herself solved the mystery of the killer dog bug, which affected dogs at Sandringham in early December 6th here in this Daily Mail article, calling off the search and saying it's essentially safe to go back in the area, which is partially open to the public, but of the larger estate owned by the royal family, where, of course, they point out they continue to have hunts despite this disease, and they point out how the Queen's cute little dogs weren't affected. But the point is, people were investigating those plots of land, and dogs were on the land. It was, of course, a body eventually found by a dog owner in the public who was walking through the area. So just more questions remain, and we'll continue to look at it. No reason yet here to connect it to the royal family, but odd that this body was found on the royal estate there in Sandringham. Now, we'll be back after this break with Greg Hunter to discuss all the political events going on. But I do want to remind you of our Prison Planet TV specials. We need your support. Go check them out at prisonplanet.tv. You can preview the site there and all it has to offer, and just help us get the word out about this broadcast. We want to grow this platform and reach more people. We want to hire more reporters. We want to up the production value even more. You've seen all the wonderful graphics we brought you, the great crew we already have, and we want to up that game another level. So please help us to do that if you believe in our mission here at Infowars Nightly News. Stay tuned.
If you believe in this information and want to support its viral spread, go to the Infowars store at Infowars.com. We've got the new G.I. Joe Infowars T-shirts. We've got the incredible Pro Pure gravity-fed filters available at Infowars.com in the store. We've got a new DVD, Scientists Under Attack, the Don't Tread on Me flag. We've got all sorts of different bumper stickers to help spread the rebellion virally. It's all there. Wristbands, citizen rule books in every order. Order online at Infowars.com today. The water filters, the canteens. It's all there. Infowars.com.
And we are back on the Infowars Nightly News. We're joined now by Greg Hunter. His website, usawatchdog.com, has become one of the leading alternative news websites. He covers the spectrum, of course. We'll talk about everything from Ron Paul to the economy to Iran tensions today. He is neither Democrat nor Republican, liberal or conservative, and he's worked more than 9 years as a reporter and assistant to various mainstream media, including ABC News, Good Morning America, CNN, and plenty of others. Greg, thanks for joining us now.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
So what do you think is most important in the cycle right now? You've got this article here on the unemployment statistics, but there's plenty more going on.
Well, let's start with the what's going on up in with the campaign and the GOP. I mean, in Iowa, you've covered this already, but they, there's some tomfoolery and some shenanigans with, trucks that are missing out of Ames, which is where a lot of young people are, which Ron Paul gets about half of those. And they had Karl Rove announcing before anybody else could announce who was going to win, and by a small margin. And this is like a Tom Clancy novel. And I started thinking, why would they do that? And I started thinking, if they did, and I can't prove it, but boy, there's sure some really questionable things that went on in Iowa. I think they just changed. They just changed the tone of everything. They wanted to make sure that Romney had somebody to run against, and boy, they sure can't have him run against Ron Paul. Mm-hmm. So I think what they did was they gave him somebody to run against in Santorum. And now look what's going on up in New Hampshire. In a lot of polls, he's finishing near the bottom or at the bottom. Santorum, all of a sudden he went from first to worst. And I just think that it's just what's been going on, and not just the Republicans. I mean, if you look at the mainstream media last week after the Iowa caucuses, you had the early show on CBS, and they talked about a poll, and they had Romney and Gingrich, Huntsman, Santorum, and when you add up all their poll numbers, it came up to 65%. Duh. And they didn't even talk. It talked about Michelle Bachmann, who dropped out. It didn't even talk about Ron Paul, who is at least in second place by a pretty wide margin.
Yeah, of course.
I think, and I have a theory on that. My theory is, listen, if they did, the mainstream media helped Obama get elected, and I think they did, and I think they did it by what they omitted. And, we heard all about Jenna Bush and the Bush girls and their drinking, and George Bush when he was running, and he played hooky from the military and what he did and what he didn't do. We didn't hear anything about Obama. We didn't hear they had a brother in Africa, or he went to school in Malaysia and he studied, in a Muslim school. And I'm not going to sign on to the birther thing. I think he was born in Hawaii. But what I'm saying is there's a lot about Obama we didn't even find out about. Why? When we found out about all this stuff with, against, Bush 43 when he was running for office. And I just think that the whole mainstream media, if they're liberal leaning, and I think liberal and conservative both, do not want to run against Ron Paul. They don't want to run against him.
Absolutely, because both sides of the fence have been omitting him, admittedly, from graphics, refusing to cover even where he polls in major mainstream polls. And as you pointed out, the fact he's leading in second in New Hampshire, and now they're trying to prop up, like shark teeth, other candidates once the formerly major candidates dropped out or lost their steam. And now you've got Huntsman they're coming up with.
Well, Huntsman did spend legitimately a lot of time there. He spent more there, according to reports, than other people. So I would imagine he would get a bump up.
But it's a small state with very few delegates, and obviously, as you pointed out as well, they're trying to anoint Romney and more so marginalize Ron Paul, even as he would otherwise be able to gain momentum in those major media.
Well, I think they're scared of him for a couple of reasons. Both parties, both Democrats, Republicans, the Romneys and the Obamas, which that may be what it ends up being, they're scared of him because he gets but half the young people. They're energized. These people care about what's going on. The other thing I think Ron Paul would get a lot of disgusted liberals because, a liberal's not going to vote for Romney. But Ron Paul, who says, well, I don't think we ought to be doing all these wars. Hey, I think that, in the debates, he says, I think that if you want to talk about racism, look at the court system. Minorities are disproportionately accused of crime and convicted of crime than their white counterparts. In the drug world, half, about, as many whites as blacks are drug users, but yet disproportionately black people and minorities are convicted and sentenced to death for certain crimes at a much higher rate. Yeah. And so I think that if you look at somebody like Obama, and he's looking at Romney or Paul, he's saying, oh, please give me Romney. I mean, he's not going to bring up the banking crisis. He's not going to bring out the bailouts. I mean, Romney, hey, corporations are people too, man. And I think if you look at both sides of the issue, and the CBS thing, listen, they spend a lot of money on these morning shows. This is not just a misspelled word in a graphic, or they were talking about somebody without their picture. They omitted him. They talked about somebody who dropped out of the race, Michelle Bachmann, and they didn't talk about the number 2 contender, and the number 2 contender by 8 votes in Iowa was Santorum, and he's almost in last place, or is in last place in many polls. That's unbelievable. That's outrageous.
Well, if it was the first time it happened, maybe it could have been a coincidence, but it's happened dozens of times on all the different networks, and now it's the day before the voting.
They got cartoons out. There's one famous, I think a telling cartoon. It's a guy with a camera, and his lens goes up, over, down. A caricature of Ron Paul, and Ron Paul's like, excuse me, they just look past him. And what the country needs, you will not fix the unemployment situation, in my humble opinion, without fixing the financial system and the banks. You can't have the banks have phony accounting. You can't be with the continued bailout. We gave Bank of America last year $200 billion in forgiveness and debt taken off their books. $200 billion. One bank, Bank of America, last year through Fannie and Freddie. Not a word about that. You'll hear the people on Fox News and Fox Business, Solyndra, $500 million. Somebody should be in jail, and they're right. Somebody should be in jail. But the last quarter, we gave away through Fannie and Freddie $20 billion. And it's been documented or been alleged in, for example, the Attorney General in Massachusetts, Coakley, who is alleging 5 banks committed fraud and mortgage fraud. Where did this stuff end up? Fannie and Freddie. Their SEC is suing former heads of Fannie and Freddie for fraud, where this stuff ended up in Fannie and Freddie. Why we're not prosecuting bankers for wanton fraud, I'll never know. And I think, well, I do know. I think it's because they're afraid if they start prosecuting these guys, they'll crash the system. According to William Black, who is a professor of economics and law and former banking regulator during the RTC crisis, he says this is 70 times bigger than the SNL crisis, 70 times bigger. And back then they had 10,000 indictments. They had more than 1,000 successful prosecutions, not of clerks, of financial elites, including a sitting governor of a state in Arkansas. And what do we have this time? Zero. We do have Obama on 60 Minutes with Steve Croft at the beginning of December saying, I think they did unethical things, but they didn't do anything illegal. Oh, really? They didn't do anything illegal? They packaged liar loans. They put them into a security. And they knew they were liar loans. They rated them at equal to a treasury when they were toxic. And we have an ongoing foreclosure crisis where they forged documents so they could go in and take the house. They didn't do anything illegal? Outrageous. And Steve Croft, who